what's at stake for NATO, Europe, and the Arctic as US President Donald Trump speaks to NATO's chief on taking over Greenland and renews claims that Denmark cannot protect the territory. All that and more coming up on AWANI International. US President Donald Trump says he held a call with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte to discuss Greenland. Describing it as a very good interaction, Trump said he had agreed to a meeting of various parties at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Now, he did not, however, specify who would take part in these talks. Trump has reiterated his view that Greenland is necessary for both US and global security. Earlier, he told reporters that the US would discuss taking over Greenland in Davos, arguing that Denmark is unable to protect the territory.
What do you plan to say to European leaders in Davos when they push back on your Greenland plan? Well, I don't think they're going to push back too much. Look, we have to have it. They have to have this done. They can't protect it. Denmark, they're wonderful people. And I know the leaders are very good people, but they don't even go there. And, because the boat went there 500 years ago and then left, that doesn't give you title to property.
European allies have rallied behind Greenland's sovereignty, saying the US president cannot threaten his way into owning Greenland, an autonomous territory of Denmark. But how serious is this for Europe, given how much it relies on the US for defense and security? Cynthia Ng joins me now. Now, Cynthia, looking at Trump's threats, what is really at stake here?
Well, Faye, there is a lot at stake because this isn't just the usual political disagreement inside NATO. This is one major NATO ally threatening another member and trying to take over its territory. So by using tariff threats and even hinting at military action, Trump is effectively arm wrestling Europe to give in to what he wants. Now, Europe has faced pressure from Trump before, but never to this extent. And you have heard some pretty strong words being used by European leaders. We heard from the German minister, we heard from Danish minister using words like blackmail. So this really underscores how serious the situation is.
No, but despite all of that, Europe is still very much reliant on US security support, especially with Russia's current ongoing war in Ukraine. Do you think that leaves the EU boxed in with little room to push back?
Well, Europe does rely heavily on Washington in many areas. So we look at military, we look at intelligence under the NATO security umbrella. And of course, with the war in Ukraine with Russia, you can't just break or rupture that relationship with the US. Of course, reducing reliance on the US military for support and defense, that doesn't happen overnight. But I think what European leaders are waking up to is this new reality that US may no longer be that ally, that reliable ally, or that ally that you can trust like they did before. So like I said, reducing reliance on the US will take time. However, it doesn't mean that Europe is boxed in. They do have leverage. Europe is still one of US's major trading partners, and European countries do spend hundreds of billions of dollars each year to buy American military equipment. And I think more importantly is that that NATO also gives Washington the military access and military bases across the continent. So there is that leverage in play, because I think a lot of Europeans are thinking, why does US get to enjoy that benefit if it is threatening the sovereignty of another NATO member? So that's one piece of it. And of course, the other leverage that Europe can use, is through the same pressure that Trump is piling on Europe, which is through trade restrictions and also restriction to some companies even. So there is an analyst who have an opinion about this. So let's take a listen to what he has to say.
So where the European Union can go is really restrict operations of US tech giants that are also very close to Trump administration. I think that was a really strong message of union to President Trump, that look, we can inflict pain not only on the country but also on the people who are very loyal to you. So I think US tech giants will be the first that come to mind. The EU has really withstand US pressures that came with Trump administration. We all remember the Liberation Day and the immense tariffs that Trump imposed on the European Union. At that time, the EU really resisted temptation to adopt retaliatory trade measures because they feared it could result in increased inflation, and also it could impact negatively the economic growth within the Union, but also the trade relations. But now the case of Greenland is different because it's really a sovereignty of a member state in question. We see Donald Trump really insisting on having sovereignty over Greenland. So the seriousness of the situation calls also for more serious measures.
That's all on Greenland for tonight. More news coming up shortly after the break.
Malaysia perlu bergerak daripada sekadar menjadi pusat pembuatan kepada sebuah negara pencipta teknologi chip sendiri yang mampu memberi nilai tambah lebih tinggi kepada dunia. Kerajaan bersetuju untuk mempertimbangkan agar pengusaha bot di Sabah dan Sarawak turut layak menerima subsidi petrol RON 95. Sabah kini memiliki 2 tapak rizab biosfera susulan pengiktirafan diberikan kepada kinabatangan oleh UNESCO.
Peminat dahagakan jaringan. City memburu. Wolves melawan.
They just do not give in.
Pertarungan gergasi bermula.
What a ridiculous match.
Arsenal menguasai sebelum ini. Namun United sedia bangkit menebus maruah. Drama epik menanti. Premier League. Inilah one for the fans. Secara langsung di Astro.
Welcome back. Hamas says it is fully prepared to hand over administrative authority in Gaza to a newly formed Palestinian Technocratic Committee. The group pledges a smooth transition that ensures continuity of essential services.
In a statement, Hamas said the move is part of the second phase of the Gaza ceasefire, while reiterating demands for a complete end to Israeli aggression. The group also calls for reconstruction that preserves Palestinian national rights, including the goal of an independent state with East Jerusalem as its capital. The 15-member Technocratic Committee officially began its work in Cairo on Friday, with an initial focus on Gaza's humanitarian needs, easing the Palestinian Authority's return to governance in Gaza.
China is among the latest countries to receive an invitation to join U.S. President Donald Trump's Board of Peace, tasked with overseeing the reconstruction of Gaza. Beijing, however, has not confirmed whether it would accept the invitation.
Spokesman Guo Jiakun added that China-U.S. relations have remained generally stable over the past year, despite a trade war marked by tit-for-tat tariffs. Washington had asked several countries and world leaders to join the board, chaired by Trump, including Russian President Vladimir Putin, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. The body is expected to oversee the next phase of the Gaza ceasefire, including Hamas disarmament, an international security force, and reconstruction, with a mandate for conflict management that may extend beyond the Palestinian territory.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump says he will impose a 200% tariff on French wine and champagne in an effort to pressure President Emmanuel Macron to join his Board of Peace initiative. Trump made the threat after Macron rejected his invitation to join the board, which is tasked with overseeing next steps in Gaza.
Do you have any response to President Macron saying he will not join the Board of Peace? Oh, did he say that? Well, nobody wants him because he's going to be out of office very soon. So, that's all right. What I'll do is if they feel like Costo, I'll put a 200% tariff on his wines and champagnes, and he'll join. But he doesn't have to join if he's...
Trump first proposed establishing the board last September when he announced plans to end the war in Gaza. However, an invitation sent to the world leaders last week outlined a much broader role, including efforts to end conflicts globally. The draft charter, sent to around 60 countries, reportedly also calls for members to contribute $1 billion for a seat on the board. with a commitment extending beyond 3 years.
Foreign Minister Datuk Sri Muhammad Hassan says ASEAN will not send observers to Myanmar's military-run election and will not endorse the poll. The decision comes as the junta presses ahead with a staggered vote, widely criticized as a bid to legitimize army rule.
Muhammad said while some individual ASEAN members may choose to engage with the poll, the regional bloc as a whole will not lend it legitimacy. Myanmar has been in turmoil since the military seized power in a coup in 2021, ousting an elected civilian government and sparking a nationwide conflict. The army has promoted the ongoing three-stage election as a step towards stability, but the United Nations, Western governments, and rights groups have called it a sham designed to entrench military control through proxy parties. ASEAN has previously called for an end to violence in Myanmar under its 5-point consensus, which includes dialogue among all parties and the delivery of humanitarian aid. However, the junta has made little progress on those commitments, leading ASEAN to bar Myanmar's military leaders from high-level meetings.
Artificial intelligence may be advancing rapidly, but global leaders say the real challenge is moving AI beyond laboratories and boardrooms and into everyday economic and social use. That shift was a key focus at the World Economic Forum, where Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella shares his perspective. Business lead editor Najib Araf has the report.
Thank you, Studio. As the world marvels at artificial intelligence AI breakthroughs, global leaders are increasingly shifting the focus from innovation to diffusion, how AI actually reaches economies and also at the same time companies and people, and whether it delivers the real world impact beyond the technology itself. And also at the same time, AI diffusion, of course, refers to how widely and evenly artificial intelligence is adopted across countries, communities, industries as well, not just by tech giants, but by healthcare system, by schools, governments, and also small businesses. With that spread, expert wants AI risk becoming an abstract innovation rather than the tool that improves lives and also productivity. Let's hear from the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, had to say about this.
Right, so there's a Turing Award winner called Raj Reddy who had this nice metaphor of AI, and he had this long before even generative AI. He said either it's a cognitive amplifier or it's a guardian angel. Right, so if you think of AI as that, then in the global workforce, right, when a doctor can get to a patient, spend more time with the patient because the AI is doing the transcription and entering the records in the EMR system, entering the right billing code so that the healthcare industry is better served across the payer, the provider, and the patient ultimately. Right? That's an outcome that I think all of us can benefit from. So I feel ultimately it's going to require real leadership on the private sector and the public sector to ensure that diffusion happens.
As governments and companies race to invest in artificial intelligence, the message from Davos is clear. The next challenge is not building AI, but ensuring it is diffused widely enough to deliver real economic and social returns.
That report concludes AWANI International for tonight. Stay with us as we track the strategies and power shifts shaping the new global order. For more updates, visit international.astrawani.com and follow us on social media. I'm Faye Kwan. Thank you for watching and good night.